ADL, it is such an honor to join you this morning, not just to receive this Bloom-Kovler Nation of Immigrants Award, but also just to have the opportunity, the privilege really, to stand with an organization that has been a national leader in its fight against anti-Semitism and in its fight against hate. I want to thank you for all of your work. And I want to thank you for recognizing with this award the work that we are doing at the New Jersey Attorney General's office. This award is an award that supports efforts to treat immigrants with fairness and with respect, efforts to welcome our immigrant brothers and sisters into the fabric of our society, and an award that last year went to HIAS, an organization that, because of its extraordinary work, sets a high bar for all future recipients. So I'm humbled to receive this honor on behalf of the men and women of my office who fight tirelessly each day on behalf of all of our residents, including our most vulnerable communities, and also who fight tirelessly each day to uphold the rule of law in this country. In many ways, my journey to becoming New Jersey's 61st Attorney General is an improbable one. But it is also one that is uniquely American. You see, nearly 5 decades ago, my parents crossed oceans to come to this country in search of a better life for themselves and their family. They took an incredible leap of faith, leaving everyone and everything that they knew. And like so many others who came before them, they came in pursuit of the American dream. That notion that no matter where you come from, what you believe, what you look like, or who you love, that you can achieve success in this country through hard work. And my parents worked hard. They raised a family, and they achieved that dream. And now, as the grateful beneficiary of that dream, I am motivated each and every day to stand up for the values that have made this country the destination it has been for so many, to ensure that other immigrant families can achieve their own versions of the American dream. But lately, it seems like the folks in Washington are devising new plans every day to make our country less welcoming for immigrants, to do everything that they can to ensure that the promise of the American dream is not available to those escaping harm and escaping suffering. Today, we have a president that dehumanizes immigrants by referring to them as thugs, by claiming that they want to, quote, infest our country, by separating families and putting children in cages, by warning of invading caravans, and by pursuing half-baked immigration policies that do nothing to make us safer and only serve to whip up support for his nationalist agenda. These actions have consequences. First, for our immigrant communities, the result is that the federal government has cultivated a culture of fear, a fear that drives some of our most vulnerable residents deeper into the shadows. These residents fear that a traffic stop will now land them in a detention center, and so they avoid the day-to-day tasks that you and I take for granted. They fear that a call to the police will end in their deportation, so they don't say anything when they're the victims of violence or of fraud. They fear that an ICE officer will be waiting for them at a courthouse, so they refuse to testify at trial. Crimes go unreported. Criminals remain on the street. Justice goes unserved, and this affects everyone's public safety. But as if all of that weren't enough, the policies and rhetoric out of Washington have directly contributed also to the rising tide of hate and intolerance that we are witnessing across this country. Today, we see people openly questioning the patriotism and the loyalty of their neighbors because of how they dress, of how they look, how they worship, or who they love. These messengers of hate are no longer confined to those dark recesses of the internet. They have been emboldened to come out of the shadows. They have been emboldened because some of our leaders invite or encourage their behavior, or because others countenance it or ignore it altogether. And as a result, we have seen incidents of hate and bias across our nation and across New Jersey. Incidents where individuals have painted the walls of schools and synagogues and of homes with words and images and symbols we had thought we would never see again. In fact, the ADL reported almost 2,000 anti-Semitic incidents in the United States in 2017, including physical assaults and acts of vandalism. That's nearly 60% higher than in 2016. And we are all too aware of the problem in New Jersey. 208 incidents across New Jersey of anti-Semitism in 2017. But it's not just numbers. Our collective hearts broke last month when we bore witness to the deadliest attack on Jews in American history. Lives lost and families shattered by the twin threats of hate and gun violence. And how can any of us, how can we ever forget what we saw 1 year ago? Those images on our TVs of torch-bearing, hate-filled protesters in Charlottesville yelling, "Jews will not replace us," out of all places, a college campus. And rather than condemn those actions, we were told by the president that there were, quote, "some very fine people on both sides." There was nothing fine about that protest. White supremacy is a horrible reminder that we are all in this together. Jews, African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, Muslims, Sikhs, all of us, regardless of whether our families were refugees to this country 100 years ago or 100 days ago. And all of what I have just described and the experiences of all of our diverse communities show us that we are facing many, many challenges in this moment. And we all have a role to play if we hope to make that powerful commandment of Tzedek, Tzedek Tirdof, justice, justice you shall pursue, a reality, especially for our immigrant communities. And so I'd like to share with you what we're doing at the New Jersey Attorney General's office to bring that commandment to life. To begin with, we're using the powers of our office through policymaking and litigation to do everything that we can to advocate for the humanity of our friends and neighbors. We've challenged the president's Muslim bans. We fought plans to separate families. We're challenging efforts that make it harder for people to seek asylum in this country. And recently, we even led the fight to save the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, better known as DACA. When the state of Texas tried to strip away protections from our nation's dreamers and sought an immediate end to that program, we went down to a federal court in Texas and we stopped them. We convinced a district court that Texas had no right to terminate that program immediately. And as a result, our nation's 800,000 dreamers, including the 17,000 that call New Jersey home, can for the moment continue to live their lives without the fear of deportation. And just last week, we took another bold step to protect New Jersey's immigrant communities. We issued a new first-of-its-kind law enforcement directive that draws a clear, bright line between New Jersey's law enforcement officers on the one hand and federal civil immigration authorities on the other. That directive applies to all 36,000 law enforcement officers in New Jersey, everyone from state troopers to local beat cops to correctional officers. And our approach is simple. We're limiting the voluntary assistance that New Jersey law enforcement officers provide to federal civil immigration authorities. And in doing so, we're telling our state law enforcement agencies that they should focus on their core missions, which is keeping our communities safe and solving crimes rather than advancing Washington's immigration agenda. And in doing so, we want to create an environment where all of our residents feel safe around law enforcement officers. We want to show that you can be pro-immigrant and pro-law enforcement at the same time. And that's what being fair and welcoming to our immigrant communities requires of us. So I could not be more proud that New Jersey has already become a leader in the fight to stand up for our immigrant communities. And I can promise you that in the time to come, my office will remain a leader. And I can also promise you this: whenever we see acts of anti-Semitism or hatred of any type, we're committed to taking the same strong action. When a town council in Mahwah, New Jersey recently began using coded language and issued ordinances that directly targeted and discriminated against members of the Jewish community by, among other things, prohibiting them from putting up an eruv, we took action. We took them to court. We forced them to rescind their discriminatory laws, and we entered into a consent decree to ensure that they didn't even think about engaging in such conduct in the future. And recently, after the shooting at Squirrel Hill, I not only condemned the attacker and his hateful ideology, but I also joined with Governor Murphy in calling for stronger laws to combat gun trafficking and gun violence. And we continue to work hand in hand with the New Jersey State Police, our Office of Homeland Security and Preparedness, to provide religious leaders with information and training on how to protect their synagogues and other houses of worship. And it's not just anti-Semitism, of course. It's hate against any one of our communities. And that's why we're also working with our Department of Education to develop anti-bias programs for middle school and high school students. Through our Division of Civil Rights, we're expanding our efforts to enforce our anti-discrimination law, one of the strongest in the nation, and we're committed to investigating and prosecuting bias crimes to the fullest extent of the law. It's all with an eye towards sending a strong deterrent message that we have zero tolerance in New Jersey for hate. Because bias against any one of our communities is a threat to all of our communities. And what all of this should confirm is that the challenges of this particular moment also present us with unique opportunities. Unique opportunities to protect our residents from anti-Semitism, hate, discrimination, and unfortunately even violence. And unique opportunities to advance the rights of the very communities that need us the most right now, like our immigrant brothers and sisters. We may face unique challenges, ones that we had thought we had left behind decades ago. But we will continue to face them united, because Tzedek, Tzedek Tirdof, justice, justice we shall pursue together. Thank you.